My name is Pierre Habbard, and I work for the Trade Union Advisory Committee to the OECD, which represents organized labor, large national trade union centers from the OECD, from across the OECD, with the OECD, which is an international organization based in Paris, which is quite involved in the international agenda on financial reform, on trade, on economic growth, and on pensions. So today, we had a conversation on how pension fund could shift to the long term. So I had basically three messages to share with the audience. One was with the context. That is, it's a good idea for sure to have a pension fund moving long term, as it is called, and to increase exposure to infrastructure. However, there is a broader context to that. There's a policy context, there's a policy pension reform context, which is not helpful to say the least. Many governments in Canada, in the US, but in Europe are pushing toward what you would call the individualization of pension risk, push for defined contribution schemes, which are schemes that are that transfer the pension risk onto workers. And that agenda is not helping pension funds moving towards illiquid assets, as is the case of infrastructure. The second message was that moving long term indeed means increasing investment in infrastructure. And as Sharon Barrow, the General Secretary of the ITUC this morning mentioned, there are big challenges ahead. Pension funds can deliver and help finance the important infrastructure needs that we're facing in the next 20, 30 years. But it's not limited to infrastructure. Long-term investment also requires a long-term relationship between asset owners and asset managers. It requires responsible investment practices to become mainstream. And within that, perhaps, and that's the third message, a renewed attention to tax risk. Responsible investment is about the E, the S, and the G, environment, social, and governance. But it is also about tax risk, and make sure that long-term investors do have good knowledge of how of what tax planning, of the implication of tax planning is. Tax planning by large multinational enterprises, the externality costs of tax planning for the community, but also for workers. One key takeaway is, but I'm sure the audience knew it in the first place, and that's to keep in mind that fundamental distinction between asset owners, including workers' trustees, who sit on the board of the pension fund, and asset managers, because they don't have the same interest. And that's a conversation that's an issue which was addressed by several participants in the audience this morning. If we want to move long term, it is the voice of asset owners, and that's the voice of trustees, of pension funds, of other large institutional investors, insurance companies, some sovereign wealth funds as well. But it is their voice that should be the prime voice in this discussion long term. Asset managers are useful intermediaries, but they are here to serve asset owners.